What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they are 2 weeks through organized team activities, plenty of action, plenty of things to talk about. The guys get a couple days break before they come back for week 3, and then mini camp, and we are off to Latrobe from there. Again, we'll dive into everything that we saw in week 2, what we're looking for in week 3, and then a couple of news and notes as we start most shows. It's been a beautiful week here in the Berg. It's been a beautiful week out there on the field watching some Steelers practice. How you feeling, my friend?
I feel great. I'm feeling really good. Like you said, it was a great week to be out there. We got some great weather. It feels like football is back.
Yes.
You can see this team kind of, figuring some things out, putting some stuff together. It's cool to see things gel a little bit and kind of make some progress. There's clearly a different vibe there in week 2 than there was in week 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think yesterday was just fun. I don't know what it was. There was an energy for the Steelers yesterday. They're on the sidelines, guys were joking around. People were getting real hyped with touchdown passes. Even like the coaches, the media members, it was just an energy. You kind of just felt week 1, you were like, all right, what's going on with this team? Week 2, you're like, football's here, people. This is a good time. You just rejoice and get to spend some time in the sun. It's always nice. And then you got to go home, finish it off, make sure that the Boston Celtics got to face the Dallas Mavericks. I know this is a football show, but how you feeling about that too? I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I'm an incredibly superstitious person, so I really don't like to, say things, that might get thrown back in my face eventually.
Especially on a podcast that gets viewed by tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, something that's, very out there. There is a clear record of it and that someone can reference.
Nick, make sure you're clipping this.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to make any predictions, but all I'll say is that the Dallas Mavericks haven't beaten the Boston Celtics in a game in 2 years. So Kyrie Irving hasn't beaten the Celtics in his last 10 tries.
He's still going.
The last time they played, Luka Doncic had a 38-point triple-double, and he lost by 28. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. I'm excited.
You just tossed a lot of fuel on the fire there. If it doesn't work out for you,
I just stated some facts, man. I just stated some facts. People get upset with that. That's not my problem.
It was all the eyes. It was all in the eyes. Nick saw it too. Don't worry. It's all right. There plenty of facts to go back on. But I'm rooting for him. I told you yesterday I'm not feeling. It's hard to root for the Boston Celtics, but I'll do it for you. So we'll root for the Celtics this year, and then after they get one, you could just move on.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. With it.
Once you win one, you got to stop rooting for people. So I agree with that. But that's good. I'm glad that I'm excited for June. When's it start? June 6th.
June 6th.
So we got a whole week. A whole week. All right. Sounds good. All right. Let's dive into some Pittsburgh Steelers football before we talk about week 2 of OTAs and what we're looking for in week 3 of OTAs. Nick, I'm going to send it down to you. A couple of news and notes for the day.
Well, I know you guys are big bettors, and head of football trading for Caesar Sportsbook, Joey Fiesel, says a lot of people are in on the Pittsburgh Steelers as of right now as far as the win total market. Quote, ever since the Steelers got both quarterbacks, there's been heavy interest in the Steelers going over their win total. We opened at 7.5 wins, and now it's been bet up to 8.5. It's a real love affair with the Steelers so far. So where are you guys at on the Steelers win total right now? Over or under 7.5 wins this season?
I mean, I think over and under 7.5 it's tough to bet under when it comes to Mike Tomlin. I think 8.5 is even a tough bet when it comes to Mike Tomlin, but they do have maybe the toughest schedule in the NFL. Steven, I'm gonna let you talk first. What's your thoughts on the 7.5, even the 8.5 over under?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're betting the under on either of this, you're betting on something happening that hasn't happened in a very, very, very long time. Yep. The Steelers don't have losing seasons. That's just so. You can talk about the schedule all you want, but there aren't, in my mind, 10 losses on the schedule. I mean, like I just did a quick run through before we recorded, and I don't think they're losing to the New York Giants. I don't think they're losing to the Washington Commanders. I don't think they're losing to the Denver Broncos or the Chargers. And those are just the ones that I think are guarantees. And I still think they're going to split the division games right down the middle. You just do the math a little bit, and you see 8 wins pretty easily. So I sit very firmly on the over there. I think it'd be pretty silly to take the under. That's just not. It just doesn't happen. Like it's a really simple analysis of it. But if you're taking the under, you're betting on the Steelers having a losing season, doing something that they just don't do ever, even at their worst. They just don't do that.
No. And you could say, like, I think last year was the best, or 2 years ago was the best argument for it. I mean, even last year, I guess, but 2 years ago was really the big one where, okay, was it Ben? Was it the defense? Were there reasons that it wasn't Mike Tomlin? No, it was Mike Tomlin. It's been Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is the thing. And you could have your criticisms about Mike Tomlin not being a playoff coach or struggling, or you got to win playoff games, so on and so forth, mediocre, win, whatever. We're talking simple bets, over, under. There are 2 reasons that you always ride with the over with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first one is simple. It's just what you said. It hasn't happened in 17 years, and it's hard to imagine that it's going to happen this year. The Steelers have, seemingly gotten better. They've put themselves in really good position, and it doesn't, honestly, Kenny Pickett could have been the quarterback. I'd still sit here and be like, yeah, I think the Steelers are going to be 9-win team. That right. Just seems to happen. And it's hard to, until proven otherwise, you don't bet against something that is inevitably going to happen. And that's where it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then part 2 of that is nobody bets the under because that's boring. Nobody's sitting around going, oh man, I hope they only win 7 games. That's just, nobody wants that.
Yeah, you got to be a real hater to do that. Like,
real hater.
Sometimes I'll do that with college football. Like, I might do that with Alabama this year. Like, I just think that'll be fun to.
But you can hate on Alabama,
right? Exactly. Like, you got to be a real hater to bet the under on someone. And I don't know. I guess the Steelers will have their fair share of haters, but yeah, I feel like you're jinxing yourself real hard if you bet the under on the Steelers. If you bet, you're betting on you're betting on the Steelers to have a losing season.
Yeah, exactly. And if it was a team like Alabama who's going to have, I don't know, like maybe a 10-win over under here. If the Steelers were 11 games and you wanted to be a hater, all right, bet the under. If it was 10.5, you bet the under. 7.5, like what, you think they're going to win 7 games? 7 games this season? That's just. They have 7 games on the schedule where they're clearly winners in this one, including likely 3 of them in their division. So chances are you're not only winning 4 more games that year. Sometimes being a hater, you have to be logical with the same sense. And just like I said, Alabama's an easy one. You could go to the NFL, and I don't know what their over-unders are for every team, but you could find a team where you're like, that team stinks, man. There's no way they're winning 10 games. Steelers 7.5. Come on, that's just even 8.5. No, I'm not. Right. I'm not doing it. All right, Nick, what else we got?
There have been plenty of headlines throughout week 2 of OTAs, but one of the bigger ones, or one of the most notable ones, I should say, coming from one of the quietest players of the Steelers locker room, Isaac Seumalo, was praising center rookie Zach Frazier and what he's been able to do in the first 2 weeks, but is not ruling out another name as somebody that could potentially win the starting job at center, saying, quote, I will say Nate Herbig's been doing a great job. It'll be a fun competition for both of them. So Seumalo not ruling out Herbig. What do you guys think about a potential competition between the rookie and the vet in Nate Herbig?
Yeah, I definitely got some thoughts on whether or not the Pittsburgh Steelers should make this a real competition between Herbig and Frazier. But I've thought about this for a while, so I'll let you go first. What's your thoughts on, I don't know, do the Steelers actually make this a competition? Should they actually make this a competition right from the jump as we approach week 3 OTAs?
I think they should, and I don't think you really have another choice. I think this is kind of the same thing as, Dan Moore versus, it's complicated, but, Dan Moore versus Troy Fautanu / Broderick Jones, who can make that move, who can, is Troy ready to step up to right? Can Broderick move over to left? Things like that. I think this is generally kind of the same idea. You've got a rookie, and for as talented as I think Frazier is, same with Fautanu, but for as talented as I think this rookie is, he is still a rookie. This guy just hasn't done anything in the NFL yet. I don't think it's irresponsible at all to, say, hey, we've got this veteran in place. We believe in him as a center. We need to have multiple options. Okay. We've invested a lot of draft capital in Zach Frazier, but if he doesn't work out, we can't just be screwed. We have to have someone who's ready to step in to be that guy. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say, while Frazier works to learn the playbook, to really get his feet under him at an NFL level, that Nick Herbig, a guy who has a little bit more experience at center at the professional level, has done this before. He probably should be taking, first team reps right now. He should be leading the competition per se. Frazier's going to have to earn his way onto the field just like any rookie does. So, I think until they have full confidence in Frazier, I think you gotta leave this in open competition. It's not ideal to have Nick Herbig, I think, as your starting center, just because you're one injury at either guard spot away from really being in trouble. Because then you've got to bring in an inexperienced Frazier, and you got to move Herbig quickly over to one of the guard spots, and I think that creates kind of a mess, and you're real thin there. But ideally, you have Frazier as your week 1 starting center, but I don't think he's there yet. So I think he's got to earn his way into that spot first.
Yeah, so I agree that I think Frazier has to earn it, and that you have to have Herbig ready to go. I don't know. I think if I'm the Steelers, which I agree with your mindset, because that is the Pittsburgh Steelers mindset. Like, they're going to approach it the same way they approach every rookie. There's no way Troy Fautanu's competing with Broderick Jones and Dan Moore while Zach Frazier's just stepping into a starting role. It's the same thing with like Roman Wilson. Like, everybody's talking about how he's already the wide receiver 2. If you ask the Pittsburgh Steelers, Roman Wilson's going to step. They're going to be very roundabout about the situation and say things like, well, Van Jefferson's a professional and Quez Watkins has experience, and Scotty Miller, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure that Roman Wilson doesn't feel like he's going to be handed everything. And I think that's what they'll do with every rookie. I agree with the second part of that, though, whereas if the Steelers are trying to make this the best case scenario is Zach Frazier is your starting center. Like that just makes too much sense. Even in the sense of, like Nate Herbig doesn't have, he's not the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's on the last year of his contract. He doesn't have the starting experience in Pittsburgh that I think Dan Moore has, whereas in like that one still probably doesn't. Like, you should want Troy Fautanu to be the starting right tackle with Broderick Jones being the starting left tackle for the Steelers. But to have Dan like have to lose his spot, he's already earned it. So I get that. Whereas in Herbig is a guy that he's here probably for the last year of his deal, and then you're most likely going to move on from him because you have Mason McCormick and Spencer Anderson. And to just kind of put him out there and really force the issue and say, hey, Herbig's got to lose the job, I think that might, come back to hurt the Steelers, because I agree with you. I think ideally he's your backup. You make sure that McCormick gets a full year and Spencer Anderson gets another year to kind of develop, and Frazier's your center, because I mean, he should be your starting center. You shouldn't really have. It should be an easy competition. Like, even if Herbig gets the team 1 reps heading into training camp, which so far it's kind of, I don't know, it's tough to say who's getting reps where, because you're really only watching individual drills and they change things up all the time. But when we go to training camp, if Herbig's like the first team center on day 1, I don't want them to hold that for weeks, like make it okay, Herbig takes snaps on day 1, day 2 Frazier takes day snaps, and eventually lead into Frazier's taking team 1 snaps, Herbig's taking kind of backup snaps.
Yeah, and I mean that's competition, right? Like, that's how it works. And I mean, it seems like it should be a formality at this point. Like, I think Frazier, excuse me, is going to end up being the better player, but he's got to actually show that. He's got to go through the competition. He's got to actually check those boxes before I'd feel real comfortable throwing him out there for week 1.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that'll happen. I'm very confident in Zach Frazier. The dude just looks like eats, breathes, and sleeps football and woodworking. So I don't have, a low bar for him. All right, let's dive into week 2 of OTAs, what we saw, what we took away, what we're looking for in week 3. We'll start with week 2 takeaways. What was your biggest one as we left the South Side and took the weekend off?
Yeah. I know I think I said this last week to a certain extent that I was a little bit more optimistic about this wide receiver group than I was going in.
Yeah.
I know you disagreed with me, but I saw wide receivers making plays all over the field this week. And I think it also had a little bit to do with what the DBs are doing. I want a little bit more from this DB group. I was impressed with the wide receivers, but I still think, a defensive backfield group this good, they gave up some plays, some big plays to some guys that I thought they shouldn't have. I've been impressed with Darius Rush. He's made some plays. Joey Porter Jr. is Joey Porter Jr. I have confidence in Dante Jackson, but I don't think this was a banner week for them. It wasn't their best week of practice, and I'm being cautiously optimistic again about the wide receiver group. I think there's a push and pull here of, okay, the offense has a good day. Does that just means the defense is trash, or did the offense actually play really well?
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it falls a little bit more on the defense though, and I'm just hoping to see a little bit more from the defensive backfield moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, and just like you said, like Joey Porter's there's been no hiccups in Joey Porter's game. He's talking trash. He's shutting people down. He's doing the same things that he always does. Dante Jackson is still kind of quiet, but I think that's good. I will say the inside, Anthony Everett's not impressing me through 2 weeks, and that's becoming a bit of a worry. Beanie Bishop isn't really doing much out there to impress me, and there's really no other options. Like Darius Rush looks good as the backup, but he's not going to – are you going to start him in the slot? I mean, maybe, but they haven't really worked him there yet. Corey Trice still isn't there for contact. I agree with you. I think the wide receivers were making plays, and it's concerning because you want to look at it and say, okay, that's good. The wide receivers are impressing. That's where you want them to be. But I also think that we're in agreement that the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver group should not be making plays. Like you shouldn't outside. George Pickens wasn't there all week. So you can't look at this and say, oh, they had a stud out there. Like if Scotty Miller's catching a bunch of footballs, you're like, okay, what's going on here? What's the issue on defense? And I think that's where there's a bit of worry. I'm not trying to bring panic to anybody yet. I think it's too early for that. But at the same time, this defense should be like elite. Like you should be able to, especially this time of year, like look at it and say like, oh, this is ridiculous. These guys are going to be unreal. And I don't think we've seen that.
Right. And I think that's the thing. Like let's hold this defense to a high standard. That's what they've earned. That's what they deserve. And I think it's pretty. I would go as far to say, secondary is probably the weakest part of this defense. If you're thinking about the, defensive line linebackers secondary. So I think there is reason for concern. It's again, we're not hitting the panic button just yet, but
early.
For 1 week, it wasn't their best week.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anything, week 3 and minicamp might, if it doesn't improve, push the issue of we go into the break and hey, are the Steelers going to sign a corner? Maybe a little bit. Maybe it edges up a little bit more. Or we go into week 3 and Darius Rush is testing out the slot, because I think that's the biggest issue here is the inside man, because you're not going to replace Dante Jackson. Like even if he's not making a bunch of plays right now, like he's a veteran and he's got starting experience, and you don't trade Deontay Johnson for a guy who's going to be a backup. Like you're going to work through those issues.
I mean, he said that yesterday. He was like, his first meeting with the Steelers after he got traded, they were like, get ready to do the same exact thing that you did in Carolina, which was start, follow one receiver, and be exclusively on the outside. Yeah,
exactly. And that's what they're going to go with. My big takeaway is, I mean, a little bit of the same. I thought Minkah Fitzpatrick looked, I don't know, pretty crazy through 2 weeks, but I'll go the other side of that in a different part of the passing game. I thought Russ and Justin Fields looked much more calm, and it just became like it was less flash in a pan and then make a bad play and just more consistency. If there was a bad throw, it was like overthrowing Scotty Miller, and you're like, well, it's when you're 6'3" and Scotty Miller's 5'4", it's not the easiest thing to do when your offensive lineman is already 6'4" and you got to throw over them to get to the thing. It's just not the easiest thing in the world. But I think Russ and Justin, both of them looked much more calm, which they weren't uncalm or rattled last week. It just kind of felt like it was sporadic hit or miss. I felt this week was more consistent. I thought Justin Field looked pretty good yesterday, but I thought Russ looked very, very poised and just, less of a, hey, maybe there's some here and less negativity to talk about in week 2.
Yeah, I completely agree, honestly. I think it's funny. There were some times where Justin Fields that guy's a cannon, man. Like it is absolute cannon. There were a ton of times where he's just letting that ball rip on like an intermediate throw, like 10 or 15 yards downfield, and it just clangs off someone's hands because he's just ripping it way too hard. But anyway, I completely agree. I think they just looked a little bit more comfortable. They looked a little bit more in tune with the offense, in tune with their receivers as well. I thought the timing was all so much better. I think they're understanding where they got to put balls for certain guys better. And you can see a little bit of the chemistry developing throwing downfield a lot more. So I'd 100% agree. I don't know what really clicked. Maybe it's just timing. Maybe it's just experience with their guys. But I think a really positive week for the quarterbacks as well. I was pretty impressed with them too. I think Fields still has some more. Like it's pretty clear why Russ, I think, was given the nod. Like right away. Like, as much as exciting as Justin Fields is, I don't think he's really coming close at all to Russ, but definitely positive week for both of those guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think a big thing when it comes to like the timing and stuff is I think week 1, it was like run your route and stop. And I think week 2, it's a lot of just continue to work until you're open. And I think Russ and Justin Fields are improvising quarterbacks enough to, find those guys. There were a lot of plays where somebody would run their route, battle with Joey Porter Jr. or whoever, and then, come back to the football. And that's when they got found on the sideline or something like that. And you're like, oh, okay, that was nice, because in real time, in a real NFL game, that's going to happen all the time. Yeah. So to have those abilities, I think that, made a significant step forward. But I agree with you. I think Justin looks ridiculous, but Russ just looks more mature and calm at this point.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about Russ, like, I remember seeing stuff leading up to, in kind of that lull between when he got signed and the start of OTAs. I think there was a popular sentiment that, like, oh, Russ just isn't the athlete that he was anymore. He won't be able to scramble or improvise or make plays. And I don't know. Like, he's not in pads and everything, and I get that, but he looks like a much better athlete than I think people are giving him credit for. So I think those off-script plays, those times where he's got to extend the play a little bit, I still think he's capable of doing those things.
Yeah, I agree. I never got, like, people say that all the time. They used to say it about Ben all the time too. Like, hey, Ben's not the athlete. Like, I don't know. I don't think you have to be explosive and be able to run like a 4.5 as a quarterback to be considered an athlete. It's about avoiding contact. You're outrunning 350-pound men. You don't have to be the fastest person in the whole world. You just have to be capable of maneuvering your body and getting into free space while keeping your eyes downfield, which is incredibly difficult to do, but is a totally different concept of, oh, well, he's lost speed. He doesn't have the gas. He can't get away from, like, no, that's a different thing, man. If you could roll out of the pocket, move, which I think the Steelers did a lot of this week, was move out of the pocket and do a lot of like throw on the run and that kind of stuff, which I think is going to help tremendously with this offense, especially with mobile quarterbacks. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't, Russ in week 1, I was a little about. Russ in week 2, I was like, oh, okay, this is good. He looks like he's avoiding. He would be fine if this was a real game. I think the Steelers would look much better. Do I think that they still need to sign a wide receiver or add a wide receiver? Yes, but I'm much more confident in week 2 than I was in week 1. That being said, we're heading into week 3. They got the weekend off. They'll go back on Tuesday. They'll finish up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then they go to mandatory minicamp where everybody's showing up. You'll probably get George Pickens back. You'll probably get TJ Watt back. I shouldn't say probably. You'll definitely get both of those guys back. Cam Hayward, we don't know what's going to happen yet, but I would imagine he's on the field for minicamp. I don't think he's looking to lose some money by not being there. What are you looking for when we get back there on Tuesday next week?
Yeah, I'm looking for literally anyone to kind of show out and separate themselves in that slot cornerback conversation. Like we talked about a little bit earlier. I mean, Anthony Averett hasn't looked great. Beanie Bishop hasn't really done anything to stand out either. I mean, like if I had to pick a starting slot corner right now, it would probably be like Jalen Elliott or something, which I don't feel confident about at all.
And he honestly hasn't looked bad. Right, it hasn't looked good, but hasn't looked bad.
Right, like he's been the best of those slot corner guys, throughout OTAs, and I don't know about you, that doesn't feel great to me. So I want someone else to push him a little bit. I want someone to separate themselves. I want someone to not just be kind of the best person out there. I want someone to be, actively good. I want someone to start making some plays, to stick with some of these speedy guys that they're facing in the slot. The Scotty Millers, the Calvin Austins, things like that. It's a tough position, I know. Like, in weeks like this, you're going to get mixed and matched and moved around, and guys are going to be facing, a Scotty Miller one day who's going to burn him with speed, and then you're going to face a Van Jefferson the next day who's got a little bit of size on him, and you got to worry about that. But you need someone who's versatile, and I just want someone to step up, find their footing, be a little bit more I don't know, impressive. I want a little bit more from that cornerback room, specifically the slot space. I want someone to step up there and emerge as kind of a front runner.
Yep, I agree. And even if, to be honest, I don't care if it's Anthony Everett. I don't care if it's Beanie Bishop. I just want it to be anybody. Like if it's Jalen Elliott, it's Jalen Elliott. Like that's okay. I'll push that narrative. Like if he's worthy of being the guy that needs to be talked about, we'll talk about him because that's where they are. Like there's nobody in that room right now. It should have been Anthony Everett, but I mean, again, taking years off of football, that's tough. Like dealing with injuries, that's tough. Coming back, that's tough. An undrafted guy, I get it. Beanie Bishop he's got all the hype around him, and I think he's got a ton of potential. But we've said it right from the jump. You cannot look at an undrafted guy. If we're talking about Zach Frazier having to compete with a guy who's never like played center naturally in his career, Beanie Bishop should not be the guy that we're like, okay, he's definitely going to win the job here. Like nobody should have those expectations. I agree. I just want anybody to emerge, even if it's if you want to put Darius Rush down there, cool. Yeah. If you want to put DeMonte KZ down there, cool. If Jalen Elliott's the guy, cool. I don't really care. I just think the Steelers need to kind of find that spot because it's clearly their biggest issue on defense, I would say right now, and one that, I mean, you could wait it out and see who's out there, but there are options now. So if you don't have an answer, learn that you don't have an answer, and build competition in a different way. I agree. Mine was going to be, how good does Darius Rush continue to look at in week 3? But I kind of feel like I said that in week 2. So I'll switch it out. To be honest, I want to see the offensive line, which you don't get like a really good look at, but I kind of want to see some sort of formation forming. I want to see like right now, Troy Fautano is playing right tackle, then he's playing left tackle. Broderick Jones playing left tackle, and then he's playing right tackle. Like I kind of want to see it come into hey, this is what's going to happen, because we've talked about this every single year is, okay, you can't be bouncing guys around all the time. And then the week before the season, you decide, hey, that's your starter. That's your guy. Okay, this is the position you're going to play. You need to let these guys naturally fit into a role. And I don't care if Troy Fautano's got to compete with Broderick Jones on the right side, or if Broderick Jones has to compete with Dan Moore on the left side, or however you want to make it happen. I don't care. I just want to see those guys start to, hey, for a full week, this is the spot that you're playing, and we'll go from there. We'll build from there, because I think that'll do wonders. I mean, we said, you joked about it yesterday. Justin Fields was running around the field like crazy, trying to avoid some dude, and there's a lineman just sitting there, nobody in front of him. There's 7 defenders in the backfield, and he's just, blocking nobody. And that's just like, that's what's happening. Like you're watching team drills, and you're watching guys like Justin Fields and Russell Wilson are running for their lives half the time. And I would like to see the offensive line. I get that it's too early to put pads on and judge these guys. That's okay. You could start to kind of build that relationship and that chemistry now, because that goes so far with the offensive line. And I think the earlier you do it, the better.
Yeah, versatility is great, but we need some guys to settle into some positions, and we need to have some continuity so these guys can develop some chemistry. I completely agree. There have been times where Russ and Justin have been really running for their lives out there, and it's been cool to see them use their athleticism a little bit, but it is not ideal. So let's get Troy settled into one place. Let's find our center. Let's just figure this stuff out now so guys can start building continuity and chemistry, because there are some new faces there. There's some young guys there. We're going to need to get it all ironed out before week 1. And I think that the earlier you can start that process, the better. It's not something that I want dragging way into. I mean, you would hope that they start to figure it out a little bit by minicamp. You definitely don't want it dragging well into training camp. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, I agree. And I was talking to to people out in Tennessee the other day, and just having conversations like, hey, how's OTAs going? Good. How about you? Blah, blah, blah. And we got into the conversation of like the rookie offensive lineman, because they drafted JC Latham, and they've already moved him to left tackle. And they've said like, this is the spot he's going to learn and compete at. And we believe that the quicker we can do that, the better. And I think the Steelers are in the same boat. Like we have the conversation of, oh, well, Kevin Dotson leaves for LA and he plays his natural position and he plays so well. And, James Daniels, how many times can you bounce him around? Nate Herbig's now playing center. Spencer Anderson doesn't have a position, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. And, here it is. Okay. Here you have Broderick Jones and you have Troy Fautano. They can play both sides of the offensive line. Pick them, pick the side, develop the side. If Dan Moore starts, Dan Moore starts. I get that, but like, let's be realistic about the situation and stop halting the inevitable, because you're pushing it further out. Every day, every week that passes that Troy Fautanu is playing both sides of the line is another week where he doesn't get comfortable in one side of the line. And I think now is important.
I was going to say, that's, not to put too fine a point on it, but you're not helping him. You're not helping anyone by, kind of, he's got to earn it, but you got to throw him into the fire at some point, and that's what I want to see.
Yep, I agree. So with that said, we're going to head into the weekend. There's still plenty to talk about, and there's plenty to look forward to next week. Week 3 will be, I don't know, hopefully interesting. At the week 3 is like the time where everybody kind of starts to show up and gets ready for minicamp, and then you get to minicamp, you got everybody there. Obviously, we'll be watching for Cam Hayward, but I don't expect him to show up before minicamp. If I expect him to show up during minicamp, plenty of action as we head into Tuesday. But with that said, we're going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast. And as we've been saying, please, please, please go subscribe to our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk clips for even more of the show. We will be back on Monday. Enjoy another beautiful week in the Berg. Peace.